Hello, it's great that you're here. And today we're going to do something special. And I want to show you day number 2 from the Horizontal Harmony workshop in full. If you are an Academy member, then you enjoy access to the full workshop. But even if you're not, today is a great day for you. And I hope that this content will serve you well and help you craft some fantastic compositions. Let's jump right in. Hello, everybody. This is Frank up here in the corner as usual. And I want to welcome you to day 2 of the Horizontal Harmony workshop. So I hope that you got all the materials for the 3-step process. And I hope you understand what the 3 steps are for and how you can use them and what the benefits are. If there is anything unclear, then please let me know. You know how to reach me, and I will try my best to help you and give you support. So today it's all about the writing part, and we want to jump into some nice and simple examples here. And that's really the key point for day number 2. Keep things simple. This is not to impress anybody. This is just to get your first ideas down. We will eventually make them more sophisticated and improve on them, but one step at a time. I want you actually to compose a nice little piece. I have written something over, I believe, 32 bars. You don't have to go for 32 bars. As you will see, I also have a little bit of repetition in there. So it's an ABA form, and it's a simple idea. One of the crucial things that I want you to take away from this video here is please keep your melodies singable always. That is your best bet so that the audience will remember this theme or this melody on top of everything. If you can't sing it or hum it or whistle it, chances are very high that the audience can't neither, and they won't really remember your great melody. I want to quickly play you through my little piece here that I wrote for day number 2, and then I will talk about a few of those spots that are not worked out very well, but we will get to those one step at a time. So here we go. Okay, so that is my starting material. And as you can tell, it is really a very simple melody and just basic chord progressions, major and minor triads, nothing more. If you are not feeling confident with voice leading, then today's bonus content will be fantastic for you. It's a perfect fit. It's actually the explanation of diatonic voice leading in simple terms. Please go through the bonus section and you will understand what voice leading is and how you can apply this very quickly and very easily. If you are a seasoned composer, then you spot a few of the problems that I will talk about immediately. And in particular, I wrote some of those things down here. So one of the problems is the distances between the chords, at least the top line of the chord, and the melody on top. The distance is sometimes too wide, and this sounds a bit disconnected. And this happens, for example, in bars 4 and 6. So let me show you this real quick. Bar 4 is this thing right here. When we get to those two notes, the distance is really way too wide. Bar 6 as well, that's 2 octaves, the A down there, the A up there. This is also too wide. So my rule of thumb is I want to close those distances down so that I have kind of the 1 octave and a diatonic third distance between those two voices. I don't want to go over that unless it makes sense musically. Then it's totally fine. But very often I just try to close those distances since it sounds more connected in the end. And in the chords right here, this is all proper voice leading. This thing right here, I've labeled this with parallel voice leading. And you can spot this very quickly and easily because just look at the position, how this thing looks like, and then how this thing looks like, the shape of it. It's exactly the same. It indicates already, well, that is parallel voice leading. Also, you have the option to go to open harmony. And that is a very nice option if you move down into the bass range with your lowest tone. Then opening up those structures sound very nice and elegant. And in this structure right here, parallel voice leading sounds great. That is something you hear very often in film music. And the moment I go down in that low range here, I have the option to go to open harmony. But let me come back to those issues or those problems right here. So the first problem is the distances are too wide. And please don't try to solve this problem when you compose your initial idea. This is also not practical. Just go with the flow, write your melody, write your chords in whatever register, and then you can solve these things in an additional step later. This is way quicker. Then another problem is doubled notes in octaves. And I'm talking about, again, the top line of my chords and the melody on top. So bar 3 and bar 9, let's quickly have a look. Bar 3 is this thing here. That's an octave doubling. Bar 9, 6, 7, 8, 9 is this thing. Again, we have the octave in here. That is not very elegant because, as you can tell, we come from this C, move to the D, and in the melody, we have this C also going to the D note. And those are potential problem spots that we can solve, and we will in the next step. But become aware of those things. They actually don't sound very good. You want to use different positions of your chords, and then you can avoid those parallel movements. But that is another thing that we might want to focus on, unless you like the sound of something. If you like it, then keep it. Why not? And then another thing here, this is adding tone richness by treating the melody as a chord tone, also if it makes sense. And we will look at some of those bars as well and find some spots where we can go into 7th chords or even 9th chords. Now, those are the problems that I want to focus on right now. And this happens right here in the second step, which I call shaping the sketch. Now you can see we have 2 lines. We have the initial idea on top, and that is a complete copy-paste of what I just did as my initial starting point. And then down there, we have a second piano, and this is now showing the adjustments that I did in blue. So this makes it easy to follow those additional steps and what I did to solve those issues. What I want to do now is I want to play you the shaped sketch down there, and then I will talk about some of those spots in particular that most likely need a bit of more attention. So let me highlight this piano only, and here we go. Okay, so far so good. Let's go through the shaped sketch a little bit with more detail here. So one of the things that I now do is I use different positions of my chords to close those distances. And that is what you're seeing right here with this little G chord that is now in a different position. And I'm also adding some additional chord structures in between. So that is what you're seeing right here, the E minor, the A minor 7. Here is another A minor 7 that originally was the A minor in here. And this is how I create a bit more complexity already. And these position changes, they come in very handy because they open the opportunity to bring in line movement later. You can later really just connect the dots, and we now create those dots by using those various positions of the chords. Now, one little note that I've put on top of everything, I suggest that you stick to the same number of parts throughout the whole little example. This is not mandatory, but it will keep things simple. For our purpose of just creating those fluent parts and horizontal harmony, I want to stick to 3 voices only for harmony. And that is the melody line and 3 voices for harmony. When I go to those PCs, then you see we can either go upwards or downwards. And I really just follow the melody. That is my thought process behind it. So the moment the melody goes up and steps on another chord tone, which is happening right here, this gives the opportunity to let the chord follow and use a position change of the chord to close that distance a little bit. It's still a bit wide, I know, but this helped me solve the problem in the next bar, which was the doubled octave. So we went from the B to the C note right here, and on top we also went to the C note. And now this is better already. But again, since I'm moving up with this melody line, I'm trying to bring in another position change. And I thought, hey, it would be great to have even another flavor at that moment. That is why I grabbed the A minor 7 in there. And you see that the melody tone now even acts as one of the chord tones. So this now turned into scale tone 5. Down there we have scale tone 1, that's the A. We have scale tone -3, that's the C note. On top now we have the missing note from the chord below, but you won't recognize it as a chord tone since it's still part of the melody. And this allows us to go to scale tone -7 in the chord down there. That's the G note. Now here you might ask, Frank, what are you doing right here? This definitely doesn't look like voice leading. You're right. Whenever I start a new phrase or a new fragment of my theme, I give myself permission to start with a new chord position. This is an opportunity to also change the orchestration later. And you will see, I can hint this actually. We will create a strings arrangement later. And I actually will leave the first beat blank in those bars right here. And this puts the focus on the melody line, and it actually allows for a different starting position in my chords. But I would not use these new starting points of a chord when the melody is still going. And here you can quickly see that this was the first pickup section into my first tone of the phrase. And this is more or less a repetition already of that moment. So that is why I gave myself permission to use this new starting point. The same thing is true right here. This is actually kind of a little B section within my theme. So I'm using more or less an AABA in there and create a little bit of a form to my melody. When we go down, here you can also spot a little bit more line movement. You also saw this 13. Now let me explain what that means. A 13 in the context of interval theory stands for 13 chromatic steps between 2 tones. That is not a natural interval, meaning it doesn't appear on the overtone series or the harmonic series. It sticks out and it gives a pretty high amount of dissonance. Now, if you are a trained musician or a jazz composer, then you might say, well, Frank, This actually also falls into the category of flat ninth chords, where we have the 13 against the root tone. And it sounds great. So what you're telling me is I'm supposed to avoid these things. Actually, no. That's not what I'm telling you. I'm not telling you anything. I'm just suggesting you become aware of those 13s because they stick out and they create a lot of dissonance. Now, if you hide it in the context of a flat ninth chord, it actually works. And the reason for that is scale tone -7. This is the reason why it actually makes sense in terms of the overtones. If the -7 would not be present in a flat 9 chord, it will sound dissonant. I hope you don't mind me going these little sidelines in music theory, because it is all connected in a way, and it's pretty hard to completely isolate one subject from everything else. In that context here, the 13 happens between scale tone 3 and scale tone 4 on a G root tone. And this 13 actually will stick out in the arrangement. In the piano, it works. Why is that? Because the piano has a natural decay to the tones. And the moment we hit this chord structure on the first downbeat, the sound fades away it faded away already when we hit on the C note up there. That's the reason you don't really experience this 13 as a problem. Let me quickly show you this. Doesn't sound like a problem, but that's only because it is the piano. If this would be played with strings, then you actually will hear a problem. Okay, but let me continue. Some additional position changes right here. So I'm just following, again, the shape of the melody. And then let me see. Here, that's an interesting spot. And you're seeing numbers again. I'm a big fan of numbers in composition. So here you can read 3 + 3 and 4 + 4. Those are, again, descriptions of the chromatic distances between the tones. So if you just count the distances from the bottom note to the next higher one, that's 3. Specifically, it's an F sharp going to an A. That's 3 chromatic steps. Then from the A to the C note above is another 3 chromatic steps. And here the same thing is true, but now we have 4 chromatic steps in between the tones. We call those structures equivalents because they consist of an equivalent distance between all the tones involved. And you might ask, how do you write those things? How do you know in advance where to use those equivalents? The quick answer to that is I don't know in advance. I write those things in reverse. So if you know the chord or the point that you want to move into, take this as your starting point, and then you write the parts backwards. I do this in a very simple manner. I look at the chord tones that I have at my final structure, which is the B flat major triad here. And then I go backwards and I try to move either chromatically in the voices, or I create a common note in one of the voices, maybe even in 2 of the voices. And if we did this, so let's start with the D on top right here. The D moves into the D flat. Well, it doesn't move that way. It actually moves in reverse, but I want to illustrate the thought process. So I went from the D chromatically down to the D flat. Then I went from the B flat right here chromatically down to the A. And here I have my common note. Right? And this created my 4 + 4. So I'm just moving chromatically, either up or down. And I look at those chromatic distances vertically that I create in that structure. And from here, I instantly knew, okay, great. Let's keep the middle note as my common note, which is the A, this guy. And then let the other guys contract to each other, right? So I'm writing the D flat into the C. And then I'm writing the F down there into the F sharp. So again, chromatic movement and one common note. And that is how I got to these structures. So you're not seeing any chord labelings down there anymore. To my understanding, dealing with those numbers is way simpler because I know the sound of a 3 + 3 and the sound of a 4 + 4. I know that equivalents like each other, and that's all you need to know to write those things. So that is why I moved from my E minor triad and the F major triad into those equivalents. And it actually sounds very nice. So let me quickly play you or replay you this segment here. It's a very nice resolution into the B flat triad. And that's only because I started with the B flat triad and wrote things in reverse. So let me see. Then what else can we do? I will cover those techniques on top right here in a second, right? I quickly want to go through those parts so that we don't miss on anything here. Just adding a little bit of those additional chord structures. And this is pretty much what I did in the beginning. So that's the repetition of my theme again. So nothing really new to explain. This bar is interesting. I developed the habit to not bother with those empty bars for too long, because experience told me that once you get in the flow of developing the bars around these problem spots, you will have an idea how to fill these empty bars later so that they fit perfectly into your environment or your context that you've created around it. That is why I just wrote down, and that's a very honest statement, I'm still unsure what to do with this bar, so we will tackle this later. That is really true. The moment I wrote it, I was not clear on what I want to do. I just left it as is, and pretty much no adjustment in the last few bars here. So let me quickly get to the techniques here. As you know by now, I'm using different positions of my chords. So once it gets too wide, and that usually is an octave and a diatonic third, major or minor, then I try to close it down. Now, the last thing here, when the melody tone happens to be a chord tone, then we can add a little bit of complexity to our vertical structures. And I want to find you a spot, this one right here, for example, the D on top. This falls into the context of an E minor 7th chord. Also this guy, because of scale tone 5 right here, I can omit scale tone 5 in my lower chord structure, and I can just go to my scale tone -3, -7 here. And this makes it pretty transparent and easy to A, keep the number of voices the same, and B, create a little bit more tone richness here and there, just for variation. That's the only purpose. Also, this F major 7th right here, you're seeing that now the melody tone originally landed on scale tone 3. So let's not double this scale tone 3 and use another tone in the chord down there. Now, one word of caution. This technique works really fantastic if you aim to have all of those voices in the same instrument section later. That is what I'm intending here. So I want to use the strings later to put all of these lines into action and into a better context, since we don't just want to stick to the piano, although it would have worked. Okay, so that being said, I believe this was pretty much everything for the second day. So what I would like you to do, if you haven't done it yet, then please write something on your own. It doesn't have to be 32 bars, but just try putting some of these things into action. And hopefully you come up with something great. And hopefully I will see you in the next video, which will be day 3, and we will talk about how we can create those fluent parts out of our grid points. And we will also discover one of my most favorite interval theory techniques, and namely, that is scaling. I have used it literally 100 times up to this point, and it always served me well. So I want you to know this. That's why I wrote it down here. You will love the technique. Hopefully you do. Well, this was all for today. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I can't wait to see you back in the next video. Bye.